Hi everybody, welcome to your week 7 video lesson. Today we're going to be covering Unit 3, Compare and Contrast. Let's get started. So what are we covering today, or what is going on this week? We are in week 7, so you've got your content lessons for Unit 3, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5. You have a quiz on Wednesday, 3.4 quiz. And you also have a Venn diagram pre-writing planning document due on Friday. That's worth 10 points. And make sure that you have your copy of The Way to Rainy Mountain this week as well. And also don't forget, we've got Class Connects on Monday and on Wednesday at 9 a.m. So what are we going to cover in this video? We are going to define, compare, and contrast. We're going to introduce the end of Unit 3 assignment. We are going to go over a Venn diagram planning document. So the planning document is what you have due on Friday. We're going to review the jobs and sentences, and we're going to look at a sample paragraph. So it's a lot of things, so we're going to just whip right through it. That's how you speak. Okay, moving on. So what does compare and contrast mean anyway? Let's find out. When you compare things, you're looking at their similarities. When you contrast things, you're looking at your differences. So always remember that. Compare means same, and contrast means different. For example, let's compare apples and oranges for a second. So the things that apples and oranges have in common, they're both fruits, they both have seeds, and they both grow on trees. The things that apples and oranges do not have in common, so the things that they differ in, you don't usually eat orange peels because they don't really taste very good. They're different colors, so usually apples are green or red, and oranges usually are just orange. And they also grow in different climates. So apples, for example, are pretty common in Washington. You don't usually find oranges in Washington. Usually you find them like in Florida, for example. All right, let's move on. Compare and contrast words. So words that compare, use when you compare. You can say like, some, both, the same as, in the same way, most important, similarly to, and as well as. So those are all words that tell us that something is the same. Words that contrast, you can say although, however, differ, unlike, even though, yet, but, instead, on the other hand, whereas, and while. So remember, contrast means different. So the Unit 3 final assessment and final assignment is a compare and contrast paragraph. So you can find this by going to Content, to Unit 3, Characters and Effects, the 3.5 workshop, and then go to Assessment. And there's a couple of documents there that are there for you. So I'm going to write this down for you. Download. All download all documents. So this is the final. There are other things that you need to download, like the planning document, the sample. There's a sample heading that you can use. But this is the final that you see on my screen. This is the compare and contrast paragraph final. And you can see over here it's due February 10th. So when you open that document, what it looks like. Okay, so when you open that document, this is what it looks like. This is the 3.5 compare and contrast paragraph final draft. And this is what it says. Select 2 stories that you have read in this course or from outside this course. They can be your favorite childhood stories or books you read recently. Write 1 paragraph comparing and contrasting the 2 stories. So this is going to be about 6 to 10 sentences, and we'll talk a bit about kind of what that'll look like. Comparing looks at their similarities, and contrasting looks at their differences. In what ways are the 2 similar, and what ways are they different? Look at the literary elements you have learned about in this course, like the following: setting, characters, narrative arc, dialogue, plot. POV is point of view, and theme. Theme was the unit that we just wrapped up. You can compare and contrast these elements in the two stories you select. So use these guidelines for writing your paragraph. So choose one organizational pattern, either a block structure or point-by-point structure, and stick to it. So we'll talk about what that looks like in a second. Create a Venn diagram or another compare and contrast chart to help you organize the information. So this is your planning document. Planning doc. Make sure your paragraph is organized. Wait, hang on, help you organize. Where's my thing? There it is. Help you organize the information. Make sure your paragraph is organized and has a strong topic sentence, supporting sentences, and a concluding sentence. See the jobs of sentences format below for help in writing the format of your paper. And we'll also go over that in this video. Your paragraph should be 5 to 8 sentences long using the proper MLA heading. Feel free to use the sample headings in the 3.5 folder. Your final draft should be based on the edits and suggestions of your first draft. See teacher feedback. I cannot stress that enough. We write feedback on pretty much everything we grade for you guys, so make sure that you're looking at that because it can give you lots of helpful hints for how to improve. And when you're done, submit your paragraph to the submission folder as a Word document. Remember, we can't look at anything else besides a Word document because the software won't let us. So make sure it's a Word document, not a Google Doc, Word doc. All right, moving on. How do we do that? I don't know. Let's find out. So the first step is to choose 2 stories to compare and contrast. The second step is to brainstorm their similarities and differences using the planning document. The third step, review the jobs of sentences format and think about how you want to organize your paragraph. And again, we'll talk about that later. And the fourth, write your compare and contrast paragraph. And we're going to go over an example. So in our example, we're going to be comparing and contrasting Fablehaven and Dragon Watch. These are 2 stories that are written by Brandon Mule. So if you see, number 1, choose 2 stories to compare and contrast. We just did it! Awesome! We have Fablehaven and Dragon Watch. Okay, so our second step is we're going to brainstorm the similarities and differences of the stories that we chose using a planning document. And so there's a couple ways that you can do this using graphic organizers. So you can use a table, or what we're going to do today in this video is we're going to use what's called a Venn diagram. So in a Venn diagram, you can see our 2 circles here. In one circle, we talk about, or in one wedge of the circle, we talk about the things that only belong to one of the stories. So my red wedge over here, we're only going to be talking about Fablehaven and the things that Fablehaven has. In this, what I'm going to do in blue over here, this wedge on the opposite side, we're going to be talking about all the things that only Dragon Watch have. So this is how they're different. This is where the contrast part of it is. And in the center, this middle wedge, I'm going to put that in purple because these are the things that they have in common. So these things in that middle center wedge apply to both Fablehaven and Dragon Watch. And that we put in purple because when you put blue and you put red together, you get purple. All right, so let's look at the things that Fablehaven and Dragon Watch have in common. They're both written by Brandon Mule. The main characters are both Kendra and Seth, and they both have 5 books. In Fablehaven, this is the things that are only part of Fablehaven. Kendra and Seth are kids. It's set at Fablehaven. Excuse me, guys. And Seth and Kendra work to save Fablehaven. In Dragon Watch, this is the things only Dragon Watch has. Kendra and Seth are older, so they're no longer kids, or they're older kids. It's set outside of Fablehaven. And in Dragon Watch, Seth and Kendra become part of Dragon Watch, which does not happen in Fablehaven. So again, the things that they have on the opposite sides of each other in a Venn diagram, those are the things that make these 2 stories different. And in that center wedge, those are the things that make the stories the same. Okay, so let's talk about the jobs of sentences format for this assignment. So what we're doing this assignment, remember, is a compare and contrast paragraph. And remember in class on Wednesday, we talked about growing a paragraph. And we didn't really talk too much about it, but we just sort of like, just mentioned it. So now you guys get to do that. Now we're going to work on that. So the way that you grow a paragraph is by taking this thing in the rectangle, the concrete detail, commentary, and you repeat it. And, you grow your paragraph by just repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. Not as in you write the exact same thing. You find another concrete detail and write more commentary relating to that concrete detail. And then you just keep going like that. So for the purposes of this, well, hang on. We call this a chunk. That's what it's called. That thing in the box is called a chunk. So that's concrete detail, commentary, and commentary. And for the purposes of this assignment, for our compare and contrast paragraph, we're going to take this chunk and we're going to double it. So times 2. All right. So that's our jobs of sentences for this assignment. Ideas. So let's pause and talk about organizational patterns. So in a block structure, let me get my pen. In a block structure, and you can see our 2 chunks right here. Let me take it all the way out. There we go. In a block structure, you talk about one story in one chunk, and you talk about the second story in another chunk. So if I was going to write my paragraph using this, I would talk about Fablehaven here. Fablehaven in that first chunk, and then I would talk about Dragon Watch in that second chunk. So that's a block structure. And then your topic sentence and your concluding sentences stay the same, regardless of what structure you want to do. Okay, let's look at another structure now. So this is a point-by-point structure. In a point-by-point structure, you see we still have our 2 blocks, our 2 chunks, but instead of talking about the 2 stories as separate, in separate chunks, we talk about them kind of weaving those details in, but we focus on just one concrete detail at a time. So this could be setting, and in the chunk 2, maybe I talk about characters. Or you can talk about, really anything you want. All of those literary devices that I highlighted for you guys. You can talk about point of view. You can talk about dialogue. You can talk about, what were the other ones? Setting, characters. All of that stuff is completely of your choosing. You can decide to do whichever one you want. But again, this is a point-by-point structure. And so what happens is that you choose one detail to focus on for one chunk and another detail to focus on for the second chunk. Okay, let's look at an example. Okay, so here's our sample paragraph. And let me mark out the chunks for you. Hang on. Okay, so here's chunk 1 and chunk 2. So let's read it. The series Fablehaven and Dragon Watch are both written by author Brandon Muell and contain many of the same characters, but at different stages in their lives. So that's our topic sentence. So it mentions both Fablehaven and Dragon Watch, and it says who wrote them. For example, in Fablehaven, the main characters are brother and sister Kendra and Seth, who learn of a magical world they never knew about going on all around them. Their grandparents are caretakers of a magical preserve, and soon Kendra and Seth accidentally find themselves caught in the troubles and helping avert disaster. Throughout the series, these children are given many responsibilities as they survive countless trials and lessons in their magical surroundings, eventually saving Fablehaven. So that's our chunk 1. Oh, where is it? Okay, here it is. There's our chunk 1. Here's chunk 2. In Dragon Watch, Kendra and Seth have matured and they become ideal candidates to help outside the borders of Fablehaven. These two characters are asked to be a part of an order of wizards formerly known as Dragon Watch. Many of the same characters come back in the series, but there are also many new ones who help the children in their efforts. So that right there is our chunk 2. And our concluding sentence, as a result, these 2 series, each containing 5 books, have a lot in common, but enough differences to make them independent of one another and exciting reads. So there's our sample paragraph. Notice how we talked about Fablehaven in chunk 1, and we talked about Dragon Watch in chunk 2. Wait, let me erase that so you can see it better. Oh, pen. And Dragon Watch in chunk 2. That probably fits more within a block structure because we did story 1 in chunk 1 and story 2 in chunk 2. But I want you guys to pay attention to this. Notice how we talked about the similarities and differences of these 2 books within the paragraph. So that's a key. You're not writing a narrative. We're not writing a summary. We are writing a compare and contrast paragraph. So we need to make sure that we talk about how these 2 stories are similar and how these 2 stories are different. So the block structure or the point-by-point structure are just ways to do that. But once again, we've got both how they're similar and how they're different in this example. Okay, so what did we cover in this video? Let's find out. Let's go see if we did what we needed to do. We defined compare and contrast. Check. We introduced the end of Unit 3 assignment. Yes, that is your compare and contrast paragraph. We talked about the Venn diagram planning document, and we went through an example. We reviewed the jobs of sentences and how you grow a paragraph using chunks, and we read a sample paragraph together. Ta-da! We did it. One last reminder, please make sure you have your copy of The Way to Rainy Mountain because we're going to start reading it really, really soon. If you cannot find it or if you know for sure that you do not have it, please email either me or Miss Seward and we will figure that out for you, okay? But make sure you've got it somewhere or make sure you let us know what happened to it. And have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and I will see you on Monday at 9 a.m. and I will also see you on Wednesday. So have a great week, guys. Bye.